Hi guys, welcome back. In this video we're going to have a look at the environments that is going to impact our model. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit this down arrow and I'm going to come to the rendered view here, and this is a really sort of quick and easy way of getting an idea of how things look in the scene. There's also an option to have ray traced. And ray traced, it's actually rendering, it's doing a proper render. If you were doing this in plain old Rhino, the gem that we've got here would actually look a little bit different. You can sort of see we've got the diamond 1 gem there. And let's just, for curiosity's sake, let's see what happens when we apply the gem that we created. Let's just assign that to the object. Okay, cool. So now we are in the ray trace mode and we've got our own diamond. You can see that's behaving the way that you'd expect something to behave when you're doing a proper render. So there's something about this first diamond here that when we're in the ray trace mode, it's probably some advanced setting buried somewhere, but it is not, it's not generating that proper that proper rendering there. So if I right click and assign that to the object, we're just getting this as if it's like a metal. But I am going to apply our own diamond, and now we can see what's going on there a little bit easier. Okay, so with this now live, any updates or changes I make, that's going to automatically update, so that's a really handy thing to have there. If we come over to our render studio, we can see we've got different environments here. And we've got a reflection environment, and that's going to show what gets obviously reflected on the metals. And we've also got one for lighting. And generally speaking, in the 3D rendering world, you would normally light a scene using a high dynamic range image. And it's basically if you were to take a camera and take a 360-degree photos of everything that you can see around you, and then stitch those together into one single image, which would create a sphere around the camera. And basically we're taking that image and we're wrapping it around our scene that we've got here. And the reflections are going to come from that scene, but also the lighting is going to come from that scene. So if we were outside and we do that, and we've got the sun in our nice blue sky, and we apply that to our scene with the lighting coming from that same image, then the image is going to drive that lighting. So we'll have shadows coming out opposite to where that bright sun is in the sky. And I hope that makes sense. It's, you know, it's a little bit to understand there, but at the end of the day, these high dynamic range images are incredibly useful for creating realistic and lifelike images, not only with the reflections but also the lighting. However, in a scene like this, we don't actually need lighting to come from a specific image. We can just have that come from just a plain diffuse white, because we're coming from a sort of a normal map here. And let's have a look and see what that looks like. So I've just hit this down arrow, which is the bright sky, but I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to select no HDR and apply that. And I'll just fire off a test render to make sure that that works. And you can see that with the no HDR, we're still getting a perfectly fine render. Okay, I'm going to stop that and cancel that. So that is actually going to speed up the render times, because now instead of calculating from where in the image the lighting comes from, it's just coming from like a single diffuse light source. The other option we've got here is for the reflections, and you can see that if I open this up, we've got reflections, and it's currently on the studio reflections. If we come down here, this is the studio HDRI map. Let me just collapse lighting for now to simplify things. And we can open this up, and there's a few different options in here Looks like there's maybe 10 options, something like that. And the reflections is going to, sorry, I should say that the map that we use for the reflections is very important. And it can either make or break the render, basically. So be careful which one of these you choose. Now let me choose a bright roof, and I'm going to hit the arrow to apply that to the scene. And you can see that we've got some sort of cross-hatching going on here on the shank, and it's also having a bit of an effect on the diamond. So this is where we need a little bit of care in choosing the HDRI map. Choose bright sky, and we'll see what that looks like. This looks more like a studio environment. And we've got Gem Studio. And I imagine that there's a lot of sort of point lights. If I look at the tips of this claw here, we can sort of see we've got these white spots, and they're just a lot of point lights sort of shining into the gem. And that's what you can see reflected there at the tips of the claws. Okay, let's go back to my named view. And we've also got, say, a photo studio with umbrella. And that's looking fairly ordinary. A whole bunch here. Rhino sky. Let's see what that looks like. And that's going to be more of an outdoor kind of scene. So you can see that as we choose different environments, the title of that environment is shown here in the reflection. Now if I come to the little cog here, we can check environments, and that's going to pop up in the tabs here, and that's what I've got here. So each time I have selected one of those, it's imported that into the scene. So now I've got a whole bunch of things like the umbrella studio, the bright sky, and a few other different ones here. So these environments here relate to the environments that we've used previously. Now the ones with little colors in the corners are ones that are active in the scene. So you can see here that we've got a studio light, and we've also got the Rhino Studio. If I come over here to reflection, we can see Rhino Studio, which is the active one, this one here. We've also got this one called Studio, and at first glance we can't really see what's happening. And this is where the ground plane comes into play. So the ground plane here is enabled. And if I disable that, nothing seems to change. So let me enable that and I'll show you what's going on. At the moment we have a custom ground plane in the scene, and that's this piece of geometry here that we imported from Rhino. I'm going to hide that now. Hide. And you can see that we've got the ground plane enabled. Now you can leave it like this, however I feel it's good practice to disable the ground plane and have your own geometry in the scene that you would render against. Although you don't have to, you can have this ground plane enabled, and what that does is it takes the lowest point of geometry in your scene. So if you were to have a line or a point or something, or a poly surface which comes down a little bit lower, that's where the ground plane is going to be set. And what it does is it's just projecting a shadow onto the ground plane. So if I disable that, you can see that shadow goes away, and then we can sort of rotate this around and we're in some sort of image or some sort of scene, I'm guessing. And that's where this backdrop here comes into play. This is the background to what we're rendering. It doesn't affect the reflections at all, it's just what you're seeing in the background. So we can change that from say a studio diamond, which comes from this general style here, the studio diamond. And let's change that to maybe the arcade. And now you can see that we're in an arcade. I'm not sure, it looks like we're in some sort of doctor's waiting room or a cheesy wedding chapel or something like that. I'm not really quite sure. You know, we've got some definitely some seating there. We've got some pot plants. Is that a dragon of some sort, a dinosaur in the background? I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure. I don't know what that's all about. So I might come and enable my ground plane, and that way you can see that we've just got a flat ground plane and we're rendering up against that, even though we can still see that fantastic background there. So I'm going to disable the ground plane, and we've got some options for the backdrop. We can just use a solid color, which is white, maybe a gradient, and we can graduate between a couple of colors. But it's doing funky things to the gem, so I would probably leave that on environment and change the environment back to the Studio Diamond Reflection, and I'm just going to disable the ground plane, and I'm going to show our custom ground plane. So this is I want to say a more proper way of rendering. Come back to our named views and double click on perspective 2. I accidentally clicked on that. This needs to be the right view. Whoops, we've got the front view, doesn't matter. So next thing we can do is we can, well, now we've disabled that ground plane, there's not going to be any conflict between having that ground plane enabled and the materials that we apply to our own ground plane. You can enable that ground plane and apply your own material, and that's going to come from the materials list here, or from whatever render materials are active in the scene. So now with the Rhino Studio reflection map enabled and our ground plane disabled, I'm going to take our white matte and apply that, just drag and drop that onto the background, so that's applied there. Now I'm just going to run a render, and we will save that and compare that to our first render that we ran. Okay, and that's done. So let's now save this. So we'll go to save, and I'm going to call this comparison render for MatrixGold, and we'll call this number 2. Now I'm going to bring both of those up on screen, and this is the first one that we did, and this is our second one. So first one and second one, you can see that we've got a lot more life in the highlights on the shoulder, and the gem is looking sort of more, I guess that's fairly realistic there. This one here, we've got lots of blues, like it's picking up something weird in the environment, and the shank is fairly lackluster. Okay, I'll get rid of that. And now let's create, well not create, sorry, but let's apply our own custom environment. So in order to do that, we can come to the reflection map here and choose from a few here, but we can, so in order to do that, we can come to the reflection map under HDR map and use this drop down, and we can navigate to a few different ones there. However, that doesn't give us the option of importing one for ourselves. In order to do that, we're going to need to go to the Environments panel. And if this isn't up, we can go to Panels, Environments, or if you've already got a tab here, you can use that cog and then select Environments. And you can see that these are all the different environments that we've been using and messing around with. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to clear out most of these. So I'm selecting everything that we're not using. Oops, I've deleted something there that I shouldn't have. This one, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one I can delete. And that's leaving the 3 which are active in the scene. We've got the Studio Diamond Lighting, Diamond Reflection, Studio Diamond Reflection, which is the backdrop map we can see there, as well as Rhino Studio 2, which is the HDR reflection map. Studio Diamond Lighting, I'm not sure what's driving that. If I right click, I'm going to see if that's going to tell me where that is. And I'm not sure if that's going to indicate. And I guess that's probably, I'm not sure. Probably in here somewhere. I'm not entirely sure. I don't think it's in our HDR. I don't think it's in our reflection map. It could be in one of the materials Let's delete that and we'll see what happens. All right, nothing seems to have happened. It's just some sort of vestigial HDR map. Okay, now let's add a new environment. And if we import from an environment library, this is going to navigate to the Rhino 6 environment. And you can see that we've got a whole bunch of different environments there. Some of these have already been selected and put into the Render Studio. And there's a whole bunch there that just aren't going to be applicable for us. I'm going to right click and view large icons. And you can sort of see that we've got a few different options here. So, like I said, these are sort of 360-degree environments that wrap around the scene. You know, so we've got a little Toronto scene there, it looks like. The gardens, outdoor, office, different environments. When we render jewelry, we typically want a studio environment. And there's a bunch of studio environments here from A through to H. But if you see, some of them have got different color hues or color tones. So absolutely open these up and have a bit of a play. But for us, I've included some nice studio environments with the assets to this course. So to enable those, just go to where you've stashed those, where you've downloaded those, the assets folder, and go to the cycles environments. And you can see that there is 9 of those there at the moment. And by the time I've finished recording this course, I hope to have a few more there as well. And I'm just going to open all of those. Okay, and I'm going to come in here and right click, and I'm going to go for a list. And that's just going to sort of compact things a little bit for me. Okay, so there's the ones that we've just brought in. So we've got Studio Environment 1 through 9. Now in order to enable one of these or use one of these, just double click, and that's going to apply that to the scene. So this is HDR environment number 1, and you can see that if we come down here, we've got the HDR map number 1. So we've imported environments rather than HDR images. And you can double click these and have a flick through. They are custom built in order to make the design look really nice. And you know, some of these you can see the gem is popping a little bit more. And we're getting some sort of blacks from shadows on the shank there. And just have a flick through and have a bit of a play. Now if you find one of these a bit dark for your liking, for example this one here, the Studio Environment number 5 is probably a bit dark, well we can change the brightness of this. And to do that I'm just going to come down here to the intensity, and at the moment it's 1. If we change that to say 1.2, you can see that we're much brighter now in the scene. And we can change that to 1.5 and we're much brighter again. So the intensity is just a nice way of being able to control how bright or how dark the scene is, just by changing that value in the HDR map environment. And you can see that that's looking quite nice now. We've got a bit more sort of life and interest going on in the diamond. And I'm just going to come back to environment number 1. Yeah, I think environment number 5 with the 1.5 intensity is good. And if you've tweaked these a little bit, you can save those by just right-clicking and saving to a file. Now, if you've got your own HDR map that you've found somewhere or that you want to use, the best way to use this is to create a new environment, a new basic environment, and then you can call that whatever you want to call it. And at the moment we don't have a background image assigned. If I was to apply that to the scene, it's going to look pretty awful. And like I said, that's because we don't have any background image. So I can click to assign a texture, and then you can come to wherever you've got your HDRI map, and then select whichever one that you want to open. And now you can see that that's been applied to the scene, and it's looking quite nice there. Now the options here are a little bit different, so if you want to go back to not having this sort of here, just come to Aaron's environment, click on that, and that way we don't have those options open. If you do want to go back to those options, just click on that image there, and then you've got things like how the environment is being mapped to the world. But at the moment we don't need to worry about that, so I'm just going to click back on the environment, and that's got us back at the basic settings. For now I'm just going to delete that new environment, and I'm going to make maybe environment number 9. I think that was, I'll tell you what, we'll go to studio environment number 1, that one there, and I will now fire off a test render and we'll see how that looks. Okay, there we go, that's finished up there, and I will save this. I'm going to call this MatrixGold 2 environment number 1, and let's see how that compares to the first 2 renders that we did. So this is the first one, the second one, and then this one here with the custom environment. So we're losing these big white patches on the shoulder, and we've sort of replaced that with a bit more of a grey patch, and the diamonds changed a little bit. Whether it's better or worse, I guess that's your subjective, you know, however you want to, if you think it's better, it's better. If you think it's worse, it's worse. It is subjective at the end of the day. So let's apply maybe environment number 2, and I will run, actually let's pump up the brightness on this one a little bit as well, intensity maybe 1.2, and let's run another render. Okay, and that's just finishing there, and we can save that as well, and we call that environment 2. So with a few little tweaks and using custom environments, you can start to really get a nice render scene for your project. And hopefully these assets will help you on the way. They're a little bit easier to use, sometimes just by opening up those environments and importing the one that you want to use, rather than sort of coming in and messing with the render studio environments. It can be sort of easier to do it this way. So the big question now is, we're happy with the environment and we're happy with the materials that we made. How do we save this so we don't have to import these every time we want to render? And that's a very good question. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the first thing I'm going to do is delete everything in the scene. I basically want a new scene, just a really clean startup scene. So I'll go to File and go to New. And we can see that we've already got some materials here, and they come in because they are applied to the layers. So there's really no point deleting these. I'll delete them just for the fun of it. And now I'm going to add in the materials that we saved. So import from material library, and I put those in the training folder. So we've got those in the scene. And then the environments. And if there's one particular environment that you want, you can just add that particular one in. And we know that we need to import from environment library. And that was training assets, cycles environments, and for this sake we'll use the studio environment number 7. And we can double click that to make that the active environment. We can have a look at our rendering settings, and maybe we want to uncheck that ground plane. And at the moment, because we've been doing a lot in the Rhino rather than the Render Studio, it's more helpful to sort of just ignore that Render Studio for now. And when you want to render, just open up that particular tab. So now we're happy with how things are looking. I'm just going to create a new project. This is going to be called our Startup project. And I'll press OK, and I'm just going to do a full save. And now whenever I come and start up MatrixGold, the first thing I'm going to do is go to our full save, and that is going to start everything up, and that's going to give us the materials. Now remember, some of these are attached to the layers, so we can't get rid of those. But we've got our metal white, our gem diamond, and our metal yellow. Those are our 3 custom materials down the bottom there. We've also got the Studio HDR environment number 7 there. So I tend to have this docked away wherever, and then when I'm ready to render, it's just coming across the render tab, choosing our resolution, whatever, having our model all set up, and then just coming down and pressing render. Now, unfortunately, we have lost our named views, so it's probably best if you go back and get those back into the scene, recreate those, and then if you do that with just the, make sure you delete any geometry that you have in the scene, and then do the same thing, just do that full save, and you should be good to go. Okay, so that's it for this step here. We've covered the environments and reflections and that sort of thing. Next up, we will be having a look at the other render models that we've done, and we will be rendering those up as well.